haven't seen anything. I think we would put it in hot. I think we put it in hot. Yeah, I don't see anything. They're certainly not showing their hand, that's for sure. Katie, you can feel the anticipation. This is obviously very tense hours leading up to what they expect will be a vote on this healthcare bill. But what's interesting is, to some extent, they're starting to shift the narrative here. Earlier today, obviously, the president announcing that the Keystone XL pipeline, that controversial pipeline, was officially approved and the construction would begin on it. And then, of course, talking about the potential for moving on to tax reform. You have discussions about that behind the scenes as well. So I think that they're bracing for what could be a loss. But again, administration officials insisting that the president remains determined, and that the thinking is forcing a vote will force the hands of all of those undecided and Republicans who are leaning towards no. That forcing them to publicly vote will ultimately ramp up the pressure so much that they will flip. We'll have to see if that calculation actually works. And of course, Sean Spicer will get a lot of questions about that strategy when he comes in just a few moments from now. But we have not gotten any indication that the briefing has been delayed. Not unusual for him to be a few minutes late, but if we do get that guidance, we'll certainly update you.
Just for the actually.
Not necessarily. I think the president just hadn't been briefed yet. That was a healthcare related event, but I think it certainly underscored the fast pace of events here at the White House. And I was just behind you in the West Wing talking to senior administration officials as we were learning that the vote had been stalled. They were learning at the same time and working on their reaction. So I think what you saw yesterday was a marathon series of meetings on both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue. The White House and House Speaker Paul Ryan's office really putting the full court press on this, because as we've been discussing, there is so much at stake. The president ran on being a deal maker and also vowed to repeal and replace Obamacare. So this would be a major loss for him. There's no doubt about that. And so obviously this is something the White House very much wants to get done, and you can feel the pressure really building up here behind the scenes.
Steve Holland. Good afternoon, everyone. There's a lot going on today, so I'm going to try to keep this on the briefer side. This morning, the president announced the official approval of the presidential permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. The last administration spent 8 years delaying this enormous investment in American energy independence. President Trump is moving this project forward in just 8 weeks. And just as he promised, it's an even better deal for the American people than before he took office. This project will directly generate an estimated 16,100 jobs, according to the State Department, all without spending a dime of taxpayer money. In many ways, this project represented everything that was wrong with the infrastructure permitting of the United States. TransCanada spent an incredible amount of resources attempting to comply with government regulations, only to be denied and delayed for political reasons. But the days of pointless government bureaucracy holding up progress and production have ended. By simply getting excessive duplicative regulations out of the way, we can make infrastructure projects more attractive, a more attractive prospect for private investors, and encourage even more projects like this one. Immediately following the announcement by TransCanada, the President announced that Charter Communications has committed to investing $25 billion here in the United States and hiring an additional 20,000 American workers over the next 4 years. Charter Communications is truly an example of how American leadership can turn a downward into an amazing success. 5 years ago, Charter Communications was a struggling company that had slowly emerged from bankruptcy. Today, thanks to the hard work and great leadership of Chairman and CEO Tom Rutledge, it is the fastest growing television, internet, and voice company in the nation. And most importantly, as Charter grew, American jobs grew, as they brought back many jobs that had previously been shipped overseas. Today, Charter is also committed to completely ending its offshore call centers, basing 100% of them in the United States. Together, the TransCanada and Charter Communications announcements demonstrate the new economic model by what the President calls, quote, the American model. By slashing job-killing regulations and reducing government burdens and lowering taxes, we will make it easier for all businesses to grow right here at home, generating jobs and boosting our economy by getting government out of the way. Following these big announcements, the President had lunch with Secretary of the Treasury Steve Mnuchin. He was joined by Speaker Paul Ryan. I'll update you in a second on that. Later in the afternoon, the President will host a Greek Independence Day celebration. And as I mentioned yesterday, at 4 o'clock, he will meet with about 24 Medal of Honor recipients to honor Medal of Honor Day, which is technically tomorrow. He's honored to be hosting these great men and women of our armed services, the greatest force for peace and justice the world has ever known. And obviously later today, the House will be voting on the American Health Care Act. The current vote is scheduled for 3:30. The President has been working the phones and having in-person meetings since the American Health Care Act was introduced. He's left everything on the field when it comes to this bill. The President and congressional Republicans promised the American people that they would repeal and replace this broken system. Obamacare's Washington-driven, one-size-fits-all plan had 7 years to prove its case. And look what it's left us with. Skyrocketing premiums. On average, premiums for Obamacare benchmark plans increased 25% in 2017. Unaffordable deductibles. The two most popular Obamacare health plans have average deductibles equivalent to 10% and 6% of the median American household income. With these high deductibles, many people have technically insurance, but nothing that they can afford to use. Fewer choices. 1 in 5 Americans have only one insurer offering Obamacare through exchanges. And of course, higher taxes. Key conservative groups like the Tea Party Express and American Conservative Movement have added themselves to the long list of organizations expressing their support for the American Health Care Act because they know it's our chance, after the American people have spent years suffering, to finally repeal and replace the nightmare of Obamacare. The President looks forward to seeing the House Republicans join with these influential voices and vote in favor of the American Health Care Act. The President, as I mentioned, had Speaker Ryan come up here and visit with him to update him on the bill. They are continuing to discuss the way forward on this. The Speaker is updating him on these efforts. As I mentioned to many of you, the President has been working throughout the week on this, starting early in the morning and working till late at night, calling with members, visiting members. By our count, over 120 members have personally had a visit, call, or a meeting here at the White House in the past few days, which is an extraordinary feat. The President and his team have committed everything they can to making this thing happen, and the Speaker is going to continue to update him on the way forward. Finally, a few administrative notes here at the end. Yesterday, senior level United States and Israeli delegations concluded 4 days of intensive talks with a particular focus on concrete near-term measures to improve the overall climate in order to advance the prospects of a genuine and lasting peace between Israel and Palestine. The United States delegation was led by Jason Greenblatt, Special Representative for International Negotiation, and included representatives of the NSC and the Department of State. A principal focus of the discussion was specific measures that could have a meaningful impact on the economic environment in the West Bank and Gaza, allowing the Palestinians to more fully realize their economic potential. Two delegations also discussed Israeli settlement construction. The fact that both governments dedicated such senior delegations for so many days reflects the close cooperation between these countries and the importance that both assign to this vital task. Last night, the President announced his intention to nominate several key additional people to the administration, including Athea Coetzee to be Deputy Administrator of the Small Business Administration, William Francis Haggerty IV to be Ambassador to Japan, Robert Sumwalt III to be a member of the National Transportation Safety Board, and also this morning, of note, the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia upheld the President's revised executive order protecting the nation from foreign people who seek to do us harm into the United States. We're pleased with this ruling, which found that the plaintiffs had no likelihood of success on the merits of their claims. As the court correctly noted in its opinion, the President's order falls well within his legal authority to protect the nation's security. We're confident that the President's fully lawful and necessary action will ultimately be allowed to move forward through the rest of the court systems. In terms of the schedule for this weekend, the President will spend a working weekend here in Washington, and we'll update you with further details regarding his schedule. With that, get to your questions. Steve.
Is your understanding that you don't have the votes to pass the health care legislation? Is that the message that Speaker Ryan delivered today? And if so, what lessons do you draw from this process?
Well, I think the Speaker's currently having a conversation with them to talk about where that vote count stands. He's working with the members. The President made a sell. He had the Tuesday group here. There were 17 members here. 16 walked out as a yes. I think we've had a group of members that we've continued to have a conversation with and try to make. Frankly, at this point, it's not a question of negotiating anymore. It's understanding the greater good that's at hand. The President understands this is it. We had this opportunity to change the trajectory of healthcare, to help improve, put a healthcare system in place, and to end the nightmare that Republicans have campaigned on called Obamacare. I noted yesterday it was the 7th year anniversary of Obamacare. We have an opportunity to make sure that was the last one, and the question is, do members realize this opportunity? There's no question, in my mind at least, that the President and the team have left everything on the field. We have called every member that had a question or a concern, tried to the extent possible, take into consideration ideas that would strengthen the bill, and it's now going to be up to the members of the House to decide whether or not they want to follow through on the promise of that. But we're going to continue to work with the Speaker and the leadership there to see where the votes are. We're getting closer and closer, but you need to get to 216, and they've started 4 hours of debate. I expect a vote somewhere around the 3:30, 4 o'clock hour. Let's see where we go. Hunter.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. We're hearing that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell wanted to do a clean repeal and then replace over time. In retrospect, would that have been a better approach? And in general, do you think Paul Ryan has handled this well?
I don't know that that's entirely the case. I know that this was a joint effort. This is something that the House determined in terms of the three-pronged approach that we had. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with the assessment of how that happened.
And in general, is the White House happy with how Paul Ryan has
I
handled
think
this?
the Speaker has done everything he can. He's worked really closely with the President. I think at the end of the day, I said this yesterday, you can't force people to vote. But I think we've given them every single reason to fulfill every pledge that they've made, and I think this is the right thing to do. Maggie, I don't want you to live tweet this anymore. So, yeah.
What is the White House's view of if this does not pass or aren't the votes? What does this mean going forward for other pieces of the president's agenda, tax reform being the big one?
Yeah, look, I don't. I've said it before. I don't think you tie any of these together. That's just not. I think there's a huge appetite for tax reform, and I'm not trying to juxtapose anything to do with today's vote or not. I think it would be great to see it put forward. The president's put a lot of time and effort into this, and I think he's made a strong case. And as to why this has to happen. I think we've worked with the House. If we don't get, if regardless of what happens today, and I still feel optimistic that, you know, the Speaker and the President and the Vice President, they got a team that's been up on the Hill most of the day. They're going to continue to try to get every vote they can. But that doesn't mean, I mean, whether it's immigration or tax reform, there's still a huge appetite out there. So.
Just to be clear, I mean, if this fails today, is the president done with
So
healthcare?
negative. Well,
That's what we're hearing.
that's what you're hearing? Well, I haven't heard that yet, so why don't we continue with a very positive, optimistic Friday. The sun's coming out. I feel really good. You know, so we're going to continue to work as late as we can to get the votes. And as I said, the upside is that, you know, we continue to pick up votes. People continue to say that they want to be us. The question is, can we get to 216? But make no mistake about it. I mean, the president made it clear last night, this is it. You know, you have an opportunity to do what you've told the American people, the commitment that we as a party have made. But this is your chance to do what we've done. We've listened, we've incorporated, we've updated in every way possible. I don't think, when you look at legislative efforts, I think the president has given it his all. And I think it shocked a lot of people, frankly, how very, very detail-oriented, how personal it was for him, calling members, you know, as early as 6 in the morning, going to 11 o'clock at night the last several nights, sitting down, meeting after meeting with them, coming back and revising it, having his team back and forth. Everything's out there. And I think each of these members needs to make that decision, whether or not they believe that they've, you know, at some point you can only do so much is what I would honestly tell you. And I think everything that we can possibly do to listen to members, to get their concerns in this piece of legislation, to make it as strong as possible for the American people, has been done.
But is the president comfortable then with Obamacare continuing? And what does he say
No,
to his
he's not.
supporters
I mean, of course he's not.
with a promise that he would repeal this?
I mean, I'm not even sure where to start with that. No, he's not, which is why he's literally put as much effort as he has into repealing this. And so, but he's made it clear that this is our moment. This is our opportunity to do it. But it is now up to members to make that decision whether or not they want to be part of this effort to repeal Obamacare. And if they don't, and I think for a lot of the you know, you saw the president's tweet this morning, I think for a lot of these members who life is an important issue as well, this is your opportunity. But it's ultimately them that have to go down on the floor and cast that vote. And I think that, you know, we've been able to cast a bunch of votes over the past couple of years when you knew a president wouldn't sign it. You now have a president that's going to sign the bill if you pass it. And now is that time. Zeke.
8 or so months ago, the Republican National Convention president said the American people, I alone can fix it. Throughout the entire campaign, his message to his voters, the American people, was he's a businessman. He knows how to get deals done. He knows how to break the gridlock in Washington. He knows how to, he's the closer, is what you said earlier this week. If this vote does go down, what does this say about the president? Is the president humbled by this process? And is he, you know, will he readjust the, how will he readjust the administration going forward?
You know, I'm not, like I said to Jill, I'm still optimistic. I feel like we're continuing to work hard. But, you know, at the end of the day, you can't force somebody to do something. I think there's nobody that objectively can look at this effort and say the president didn't do every single thing he possibly could with his team to get every vote possible. And I think that's why, you know, I still feel good about this. But, you know, we are where we are, and members have got to make that decision for themselves. This is the final hour to make that decision. Blake.
Sean, is it under any consideration to pull the bill at all between now and then?
You guys are so negative.
Well, there's reports out there.
I understand,
that's part of
but
the thinking.
there are reports out there. The speaker and the president are talking now. The leader and the whip are, you know, doing their vote counts. The debate is ongoing. You know, we're going to continue. We are proceeding with a 3:30 vote as scheduled. John,
Take me through some of, if you don't mind, the thinking yesterday when the bill was pulled and then the president had made the decision, or his team, they went to the Hill saying there's going to be a vote today. At what point did he make that calculation? Why did he make that calculation? Can you bring us through some of that?
yeah,
thinking?
I mean, there's a couple things. One is I think we wanted to be as open as possible with the vote. Having it on the current trajectory last night, it was going into the wee hours of the morning, and I don't think that for all that we've talked about, that wasn't the appropriate way to vote. I think we decided to work with the House and ask that they postpone and make sure that it was done in the light of day. But I think that he's had enough discussions, and it is not about improving the bill anymore. I think he has taken into consideration every member's thoughts and concerns and relayed those to the House. And I think to the extent that this balance of trying to get to 216 in this case is such that there are some people that come in with ideas and you say, if you do that, to get your vote, I'm going to give up 26, or to get these 3, I'm going to give up 12. And I think we have struck in the right balance right now and incorporated it, and it's the strongest possible bill. But he's going to continue to work as hard as he can until the very end. Charlie.
How important is a live vote to the White House and to the president, watching to see who's on his side and who's not?
We know. I mean, we have a whip. I mean, we've seen the whip counts. The whip, Mr. Scalise has done a phenomenal job with Leader McCarthy. We know who's, where the vote count stands, and so it's not. We don't need a live vote to tell us where the votes are. People have been pretty straightforward with where they are and what their outstanding issues are.
And the president and the speaker are meeting right now. Do you know? Can you tell us anything about the character of that meeting, or what exactly they're looking at going forward?
Well, they're discussing. They're not looking. They're sitting down and talking about where it stands, some of the outstanding issues, and whether they're onesies or twosies or five. How many? What are the concerns and outstanding issues of some of the blocks and some of the individuals, and having a discussion on that. Anita.
If this bill doesn't pass, sorry.
If there's somebody that's going to ask when it passes, and you can.
Okay, well, do you want to have a briefing right after?
The vote then? Okay.
All right, you got score 1 for you.
If the bill doesn't pass, does the president still have confidence in
I think he
Speaker
answered
Ryan?
that question earlier
Well,
today.
does he think that he should step down if it doesn't pass?
He answered that question earlier, and he said he did. So, asked and answered.
And then logistically today, after the vote, whatever happens, how will we get a response from you all?
Electronically or verbally, but one of the two. Peter.
Thank you, Sean. This is the president's first foray into the legislative sausage-making process, so to speak.
Yeah.
Has he reflected at all on the experience? I mean, how does he feel it differs from, for example, negotiating a real estate deal, a business deal? Is it more complicated? Is it trickier? What's his feelings about it?
I think we'll have plenty of time to reflect on it after we do this. So I'll know. I know that I'll just leave it at that for now. Kristen.
Thanks. Without prejudging the outcome of the
Thank
vote.
you.
Does the president in any way regret pursuing healthcare first, given how complicated it has been?
No. I think if you think about it legislatively, in order to maximize, and I know this, for most people it doesn't make a ton of sense, but the savings that you achieve through the first reconciliation of healthcare, which we're doing through the 2017 budget process, which still continues, allows us to utilize the savings in that process to maximize additional tax reform measures that will start in the FY 2018 reconciliation process. So while that sounds like a ton of inside baseball gobbledygook, the reality is in order to maximize tax reform, both on the corporate side to make our businesses more competitive and to give individuals, especially middle-class Americans, more tax relief, doing this in that way maximizes the amount of savings that you can use for the second reconciliation package, which would be tax reform. Doing it the first way, you can do, but again, you're not going to achieve the full potential that you could if you did it the way that is happening now. But that being said, I mean, it's not a question of, we all knew how big this was. It's 1/5 of the economy and what it took. The issue is that I think, the disparate interests that are there and some of the process explaining, if you will, that understanding the way that this is happening, and I think legislatively it's complicated. And for a lot of folks, that just understand, why can't you do it all in one foul swoop? What's the Byrd rule? What's reconciliation? Why do you have to do it in 3 phases? I think for a lot of people that is a little bit complicated to understand and and it's not just a question of understanding. I think one of the other things that the president and the team have found is that there's a lot of issues where people are wondering, well, if I vote for this, how can I guarantee that I get something in phase 2, which is the administrative pieces that Secretary Price would institute. And then third is, well, these legislative things that will take 60 votes that complete the overall package. How do I have trust? And so there's a lot of the comprehensive nature of this makes it very complicated. And I think that's a lot different. Normally you have one bill that sails through and it deals with all of these things and you can roll it all in. If someone has an amendment, you add it in. In this process, we're having to have all these one-off discussions about, will the Senate accept this if you put it in? If you put it in, will they, not only will they accept it, but will the Byrd rule take place and kick out the whole thing? That complicates this probably like nothing else.
Understood. Just to put a fine point on it, though, was it his initial ask to do healthcare first, or did House Speaker Paul Ryan say,
I think this was
the
something that during the
Okay.
transition, we sat down and gamed out in coordination with the House in terms of what should go first and why. But again, it's not a question of just what should go first, it's a question of if you don't do it first, do you lose some of the potential and savings that you would achieve through the second reconciliation?
Would it have been wiser to try to work with the Freedom Caucus, for example, on something like infrastructure reform to build up some goodwill?
I think,
with
look,
that caucus?
Kristen,
If
we've
they
talked
went
about
back
this
to
since 2010. Every Republican, with the exception of probably a handful, has campaigned from dog catcher on up that they would do everything they could to repeal and replace Obamacare. And I think to get in and say, hey, you should have done something else, wouldn't be fair to the American people who have said, okay, I'll vote for you, but I want you to fulfill this pledge.
And just finally, does the buck stop with him on this?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, you can't force someone to vote a certain way. I think in the sense that has he done every single thing? Has he pulled out every stop? Has he called every member? Has he tweaked every tweak? Has he done every single thing he can possibly and used every minute of every day that's possible to get this thing through? Then the answer is yes. Has the team put everything out there? Have we left everything on the field? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, this isn't a dictatorship, and we've got to expect members to ultimately vote to how they will according to what they think. But I think as the president made clear, they're the ones who have to go back and answer to their constituents why they didn't fulfill a pledge that they made.
Non-healthcare question for you. Regarding these documents that Devin Nunes says show incidental intelligence collection of identifying information about people associated with Trump campaigns, can you categorically rule out that Chairman Nunes received or was alerted to these documents from someone at the White House?
I'm not aware of where he got the documents from. I don't know.
Can you rule out that
I
they came from the White House?
I can't. I don't know where he got them from. He didn't state it, so I don't have anything for you on that, and so I cannot say anything more than I don't know at this point, Cecilia.
So if the president has done everything he can possibly do, and the speaker has done everything he can possibly do, the team has put everything on the table, who's to blame right now for this holdup in your
Well,
eyes?
again, let's wait and see how this thing. I'm not assigning blame.
Well, but you wanted to vote even last night or this morning, so there is a stall. So from last
No,
night to
no,
this
no. We
morning-
did want to vote last night, and I think as I mentioned, as we got into the evening hours, the idea wasn't to bury this at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning.
Initially, you were asking for one yesterday, and there was a statement from your
No,
press
no,
office
and
that
I'm,
asked
no,
for
no,
one this morning.
and I'm not backing away from that. We wanted a vote yesterday, but as we got the process went on, we realized that vote would occur probably actually into today, in terms of like calendar wise, and that doing it at 1, 2, 3 in the morning was not something that would be in keeping with what we had promised.
So who's to blame for the stall?
I
right
don't.
now? Is the
There's no.
Freedom Caucus? Is it-
I think it's not a blame right now. It's a question of getting all these members together and dealing with all. I mean, you've seen the activity. You've seen the members go back and forth. It's right now we're still in that active discussion phase with trying to figure out who we can get on board and whether or not we can move forward. But we're not there yet.
But you put this ultimatum out there. Is the president right now still confident that he can see this bill through? That
The
you
president is
will
confident
repeal
that
and
we have
replace
done
Obamacare?
every single thing possible, made the case, updated it, added, and done everything to listen to the concerns and to do everything that fulfills the promises that we and members have made with the American people. John.
Thank you, Sean. Without prejudging the outcome of the vote today, but focusing on your comments and the president's saying this would be a vote against life if people voted
Right.
against it. Several Republican members said they did not want the vote on Planned Parenthood in this particular bill. Congressman John Faso of New York was particularly outspoken. Did anything come up in the negotiation or from the White House of saying they guarantee a separate vote on Planned Parenthood and leave it out of the bill?
I'm not aware of that, John. I'm not aware that happened.
And the White House, from your tone and the president's, the White House wanted the Planned Parenthood vote in.
I'd have to go back and look at, there's a lot of discussions that go on. I honestly can't remember how or when that came up.
The other thing I wanted to ask was that the last two members who announced they were no, Chris Smith and Frank Lobiando, Republicans of
Right.
New Jersey, both cited the number of Medicaid recipients in their district as their premier reason. Congressman Lobiando said in 3 counties, 30% of his constituents were on Medicaid, and he wanted no damage. Was there anything discussed on Medicaid? Was it on the table in the negotiations?
Well, I know that there was a discussion about the expansion of Medicaid and some of the work requirements with respect to able-bodied Americans who are receiving that. But, I would say this, John, one of the things that, not member-specific to either of the members from New Jersey, is that members have to understand that the current system is unsustainable. So if you vote no today, then what is your alternative? And what do you want? Because right now, there's a lot of folks that have said they're gonna vote no, which is, their prerogative. But at the end of the day, the current Obamacare system will collapse on its own. And so the question that they have to ask themselves, or that they're going to be asked by their constituents, is then what is your alternative? Because right now, this is the choice that will save the system. The other choice is to do nothing, and that is going to collapse the system. Amen.
Thanks, John. The stock market's been largely looking at this as a proxy for how you're going to do on your tax cut proposal. Can you give me a sense of what the lessons learned here are about how this was handled that you might apply to the tax cut
Look,
proposal?
Amen, I've discussed this earlier. I'm not going to start getting into lessons learned while we're in the middle of debate of a current bill. I mean, we'll have plenty of time. If you want to stop by over the weekend, we can talk about, I'd be glad to sit down with you on that. But again, we're not, right now, we're focused on getting the votes. The House has a vote scheduled. That's what our focus is, not to figure out, we'll have plenty of time for that. Jen?
Is the president going to just simply wash his hands of this today? If it doesn't
You
go his
guys,
way?
look, we're not, the president's going to wash his hands several times, but I don't know.
A central campaign promise of the president of the United States.
I understand that, and so I get it. So slow down. Let's turn on C-SPAN, and I'll watch this together, and then we can discuss what happened. Jen.
Treasury Secretary Mnuchin was talking this morning about doing tax reform by the August recess.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's a reasonable timeline, and why the rush? Are there any lessons learned from this healthcare debate that would say we should
Again,
do
I
that
think
quickly?
tax reform is something that we've talked about. There's plenty of time. I think it's a goal, and I think it's an ambitious one, and I think it's one that we're going to try to stick to. But let's get by today, and then we'll lay it out. But I think tax reform is something that the president is very committed to. If you've seen him very publicly in the last couple open events talk about how excited he is to move on once this is done to tax reform, because he understands both sides of this, that the business piece of this, we are so uncompetitive when it comes to our other worldly competitors in terms of our tax rate. And that when we have these discussions about keeping companies from either shipping jobs overseas or growing, bringing back jobs to America, the two things that come up over and over again are our tax rate and our regulatory system. And I think he understands that on the tax front, we can be a lot more competitive with the rest of the world in growing American jobs here at home and, frankly, expanding manufacturing if we lower that. But also that the American middle class desperately needs and wants a tax break. And I think the more that we can do with that. So this is something that I think we're going to be continuing to work on, and we'll have more on that later. Trey.
Sean, how much credit will the president take for the outcome of this health care bill?
I'm going to refer you to the last 8 people. Let's see where we go from here.
Quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Is the White House still as confident as they were earlier in the week, and is the president still as confident as he was earlier in the week that this health care bill will pass?
I would suggest to you, my answer that I said to Kristen is that we are confident that we have done everything. And it is now up to voters. I mean, the reason the president called for a vote, and respectfully, obviously it's not up to us, but the reason that he asked Speaker Ryan and Leader McCarthy to call for a vote is we've done everything. We've done every single thing, that every meeting, every call Every discussion, every idea has been out there, adjudicated, listened to, and I think that now's the time for the vote. And so we're a couple hours away, and let's see where we
Does
go.
the level of confidence remain?
I think in the sense of what we did, yes, Peter.
I will ask you, the president can order every surveillance transcript that mentions himself or his associates in regards to Russia for the investigation that he called for to be brought to his desk at any time. Has he done that?
No.
So yesterday you had asked specifically, you said that the concern should be less about the process and more about the substance. I asked because that would be one way to get directly to the substance. On the substance, Devin Nunes said initially that he, quote, there was evidence that, quote, clearly showed that the president-elect and his team were at least monitored. Then today he said, asked if Trump or his associates were monitored or mentioned, he said, we don't know, we won't know until we actually receive all the documentation. The president said he's somewhat vindicated. So given the fact that Devin Nunes doesn't actually know if the president was monitored or whether he was even mentioned, what is he vindicated by?
Well, I think that there has been an acknowledgement that that there are documents out there showing that people were surveilled or monitored to some degree.
They could have exclusively been foreigners, Devin Nunes concedes.
Okay, well, Devin Nunes also made it clear that he's going to have a hearing later next week with several members of the intelligence community and calling them others back. And so let's wait and see what
is the president vindicated by?
The president said he felt somewhat vindicated because I think that there is an acknowledgement that that as we proceed down this discussion, it continues to show that there was something there, and that despite the constant discussion about the process, and hold on, Peter, I understand. I get this is. I understand that, and he also said that he's going to have a hearing and he's going to call the people back and he's waiting for the documents. So let's wait and let that process evolve.
Thank you, Sean. A couple of questions. First about Keystone. What changed? It seemed like it took forever in covering the Obama administration for this thing to finally get over the finish line. It never did, and relatively quickly, less than 65 days in, it's finally made its way over the finish line. What changed, especially with respect to the State Department's view of the Keystone XL pipeline? And is it your opinion that it would be good to hear from the president, win, lose, or draw, after what we learned today vis-a-vis healthcare reform?
So, simply put, on Keystone, it was a priority. I mean, the president came in, he signed an executive order on it. He had talked about it during the campaign, and he made it a priority. He made it a priority for his team here at the White House to get it done. Not only the jobs, but incorporating U.S. Steel, and there's a lot of things. But I don't think it's any simpler than he made it a priority for him, his team, this administration, the Department of State, and others, and that's it. He recognizes the importance of that to both energy and to jobs in our economy, and simply got it done. And I'll leave it up to the president once we go forward to see how it goes on. Margaret.
Sean, as the deal maker, why does the president feel that this take it or leave it approach is the right one on healthcare?
Because I think he has done, I mean, at some point you've listened to everybody, you've gotten all other ideas, you've gone back and forth, you've incorporated them, you've assuaged them in some way, shape, or form, you've updated the bill, and a lot of times it's the same people coming back over and over again. And you go, okay, I've listened to you, I've taken your ideas. At some point, we either have a deal or we don't. And I think that's where the president finally drew the line and said, we've been having this discussion, we've had the meetings, and we've done everything possible to address the concerns and ideas and opinions that people have brought up. And that, I mean, I don't think you can say it any simpler. I think he has done every single thing possible, and you end up at some point finding yourself going around and around and saying, okay, let's call the vote.
But isn't there a political cost to a collapse, potentially?
I think that at some point there's a political cost to dragging this out as well and saying, let's just keep letting it go. And I think that's where, you know, we've came to a decision that it had gotten as far as it can go. Caitlin.
If there's a collapse, though, isn't there a cost that the president will at some point have to, you know, pay for? If it's either cleaning up the collapse that you have been predicting.
No, I think that, look, this is...
Besides, you know, the upcoming election in 2018, I'm talking about economic impact, all the impact on the states.
I get it, and I think that what we'll have to look at the landscape, and at some point, you know, I think right now Democrats made a decision during this debate that they they wanted to stick by Obamacare. I think at some point the president has talked about this, that, this is going to collapse. And, let's see where this thing heads. But I think right now we have a plan on the table that allows for a solution that will address all of the concerns that frankly were initially brought up as far as what the Affordable Care Act was supposed to do. Caitlin.
So if you know what the vote counts are right now, and there's no discussion of pulling the healthcare bill, and it gets closer to 3:30 and you still don't have the votes, why vote?
I'm not going to discuss our strategy. I mean,
But you see what I'm saying?
I
Like,
do.
If you know what the votes are and you know that you don't have the votes for it to pass, why vote?
I understand your question. I'm just not going to comment on our strategy. I think the president and the speaker are going to have a discussion about where those votes are and what some of the members' needs are, and we'll take it from there. Athena.
You talked about all the work that the president and his team have put into this, the early morning calls, late calls. The other day, one of the members of Congress who was here to meet with the president, Congressman McHenry, called to say we're bringing him to the closer. You embraced that nickname from the podium. Whatever happens today, do you still feel comfortable calling the president the closer when it comes to deal making on all this?
Look, I think I said it to Kristen and a couple others. I think he has done everything possible. There's no one, either on Capitol Hill or any honest observer of what's happened, that doesn't recognize the extraordinary feats. But at some point, as I mentioned, this isn't a one-on-one negotiation. This is, you have to get to 216, and I think part of this question is to go to some of those no's and ask them, what is the reason and what would you do? And the problem is that, as I mentioned before, there's this balancing act where to get these two members, you're giving up 14, but we're doing everything possible to get to that 216, and that. I think when you actually objectively look at the effort that was undertaken, there's no question that every single thing that has been done to maximize the vote count on this.
And to be very, very clear, this has been addressed a few times, but I want to get a clear answer. You've talked a lot about how this is the chance, this is the opportunity for Republicans to make good on campaign promises. I asked the president a couple days ago, what happens when you keep pushing if this fails today? And he said, we'll wait and see, we'll have to see what happens. Are you saying right now that there will be no future attempts to comply with that campaign promise if today's attempt fails?
I can't say that there'll never be, and I'm not going to be fatalistic and we've got to vote at 3:30. I know that the president's made it clear that this is the effort, this is the train that's leaving the station, and that he expects everyone, this is our opportunity. And he's got a lot left on the agenda that he wants to get done, whether it's, immigration, taxes, the border wall. There's so many other things that he wants to get done that we're not going to sit around and figure out. This is the opportunity. This is the time. This is the opportunity for every member who has said that they want to repeal and replace Obamacare to put their vote in the yes column.
And last one, if it does pass today, you've talked a lot about this being done in 3 phases, today being phase 1. Phase 2 and phase 3, one of the problems I think is that this is not information that is in scorable form. The steps that Secretary Price might take and then what may end up in this final bill. Is there
I don't know yet.
being
At some
done?
point, maybe it can be. I mean,
Can you put the administrative steps that the Secretary
I don't
Price-
know.
Is that something that's being attempted to be done? Because that's the kind
I
of
think right
information
now
I
we're
think
kind of
members want.
focused on the vote, but I think that we'll have either OMB or CBO take a look at not just the other elements, but can you look at it in its totality? I don't know but that's a good question that I can have the OMB folks address potentially with the CBO folks. Thank you, guys. I'm sure we'll have some additional updates for today. Thank you.
My pants, sorry.
Hello, everyone. I think you can hear me. I'm just getting settled in here with my earpiece and my iPad. Sorry. It's Steve Lookner. We've just been watching the Sean Spicer White House press briefing. Quite an interesting briefing today. So we're going to do a little post show here. And post show is going to be a little abbreviated today because, because we're going to be covering this House of Representatives vote on this health care bill, which is supposedly still happening. The House vote is supposed to happen at 3:30 Eastern. So we're planning on having special live coverage for you starting at 3 Eastern. That would be 2 Central. So for now, we're going to go over the press briefing, but be sure to tune in for our coverage of the House vote. If it still happens, I got to say, I will be a bit surprised if it still happens, because as Sean Spicer was doing his press briefing, there were a number of reports that came out in the press that already there are a number of press outlets are reporting that they have counted at least 34 Republican no votes, which is way on this bill, which is way more than enough to get the bill not passed. So I believe if there are 22 Republican no votes, then the bill will not pass, assuming all the Democrats vote against it, which people are assuming will happen. So and that's just now, and so it certainly seems, if the reporting is accurate, that this bill is not going to pass, and also, at least that's what the signs are saying, and also it could not pass by a significant margin. Now, the press briefing was quite interesting because Sean Spicer in the briefing certainly did not exude confidence it will pass. The attitude taken was more, we've done all we can, and we want to have a vote to make people vote and be on the record, but we've done all we can. So it's like, it seemed to me that Sean Spicer's attitude was he was aware this very well might not pass, but they wanted to have the vote anyway. Now, are they still really willing to have the vote if, I wonder if there's a chance that it's not like, let's say the bill doesn't pass. There's a chance to me, based on what I'm hearing, that it's not just that it doesn't pass by, like, say, 2 votes, that there's a significant defection, people, that a lot of Republicans don't vote for it. And does the White House really want to go through with that? If it's, it's one thing if it doesn't pass in a close vote and you can say, well, it didn't pass because the House Freedom Caucus didn't vote for it and you blame them. But if the numbers get up there enough, then it's seen as like, this wider range of Republicans didn't want to vote for it. It could be seen as more of a failure, even an embarrassment if it doesn't pass by a big enough number of votes. So I'm not sure what that number is. But if 50 Republicans vote against it, does it then become embarrassing that they had the vote? So this is an interesting question, and I will believe they're voting when I see it. I know it's scheduled. But at the same time, remember, the press briefing yesterday, Sean Spicer said, we're going to have the vote tonight. And then 2 hours later, we found out that they weren't going to have the vote. So to me, open question whether they're going to have this vote. And personally, this is just me personally, given the reporting on the number of people already committed to vote against this, reportedly, I would be surprised if they had the vote. Now, they very well might. And maybe at this point they're committing to it. But if the next hour, if they hear more Republicans are going to vote against it, will they change their mind and decide to not have the vote? And just technically speaking, now, it's not up to the White House whether to vote. I believe it's up to the Speaker of the House whether to have the vote. But I'm guessing the Speaker is, consulting with the White House. And if President Trump says, Paul Ryan is probably going to go along with what President Trump wants to do on whether to have the vote or not have the vote. So that's at least my thought on this. Would love to get your comment while we're on the here for the post show, your comments on what you thought about the press briefing. What do you think about this whole thing with the health bill? If you would like to send in your comment, please direct message me on Twitter. I'm at @Lookner, @LOOKNER. Or you can email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. I have some more things to talk about the briefing, but I first want to get to your comments, things you've written in. And let's see here. Oh, yes, and we could take calls too. And that number, if you'd want to call in, you can call in and give your opinion on what's going on. 202-470-0049. That's 202-470-0049. Would love to hear from you on the phone and hear what you're thinking about what's happening today. Let me get to some of these comments, however. This was from Chris. Chris said, would Republicans have approved if this was called Trump Care because they could have blamed him if it fails? My impression, Chris, is that what the program is called is not, that wouldn't affect the vote either way. It seems that the Republicans who are voting against it are voting against it because of certain things in the bill that they feel their constituents would not approve of, or they personally would not approve of, or both. And that's my take on it. Thank you for the question, though, Chris. There was another, I remember I got a couple emails I wanted to read. Let me call my email up here. Kurt Novak wrote in. Kurt said, Trump ran on repeal the failed Obamacare, but instead they are making worthless changes and stamping Trump's name all over it. President Trump has made a horrible decision to back Obamacare 2.0, and now he will own its failure. Trump would be best off letting backstabber Ryan fail and demonstrate his incompetence. Throw Ryan and Republican establishment under the bus. The Republicans and Democrats have failed the American people. President should use the bully pulpit and beat them over the head with it. Let Obamacare fail entirely. Let traitor Ryan fail entirely. That is from Kurt Novak. And Kurt, I think, sent me another message here. Let me just check it here. Kurt also says, Obamacare is Social Security on steroids. The Health Insurance Act is a Ponzi scheme that was designed to fail, then charge losses to future taxpayers. All profits go to insurance companies. All losses go to future taxpayers. It is a transfer of wealth from the next generation of taxpayers to the current owners of insurance companies. Thank you, Kurt, for your messages. And just regarding your first message, I think some people could see President Trump, you were saying he should throw Paul Ryan and Congress under the bus. I think some people could see, for example, what Sean Spicer said in this press briefing, a hint of a sort of strategy like that, because what Sean Spicer said in the press briefing is, look, President did all he could. He doesn't like Obamacare. He did all he can. You could read that as saying, hey, you know what, if this bill doesn't pass, it's not the President's fault. He did all he could, and the people you should blame are, Congress, the Republicans in Congress, maybe Speaker Ryan, who knows, but we'll see, if this bill doesn't pass, if there's a vote on it and it doesn't pass, we'll see if President Trump comes out and, more strongly blames someone in particular for it. We'll have to see what happens. Again, I'm not convinced there's going to be a vote on it. I know there's a vote scheduled, and we will be covering that vote. So, the vote's supposed to be at 3:30 Eastern Time. That's about an hour and a half from now. We are going to cover it starting at 3 Eastern Time here at Right Side Broadcasting. We hope you join us for that. And we will give you the blow-by-blow as the vote is going. If the vote happens, I still think there's a chance that I wouldn't be surprised if sometime in the next hour or so, Jake, I'm hearing you. I just want to make sure you're not talking to me because Okay, so, and we're just so you know, we're going to end in about 5 minutes here so we can get all prepared for that, and then we're going to come back on at the top of the hour. So we're going to take a few more comments and questions here. But I think there is a chance that there will be no vote, and we'll hear something about that. If there is, we'll come back on and let you know that as well. So either way, we'll keep you informed here at Right Side Broadcasting. I'm just checking here to make sure I got caught up to your comments and stuff. And also I want to check, this is from Stephanie Derrick. Stephanie Derrick says, why do you think so many Republicans are voting against? Well, I think the hard thing about this bill is that among the Republicans, there's a wide range of them. There's conservative Republicans who are representing very conservative districts, and there are also Republicans who are representing more moderate districts, and they have more moderate views. And the problem is that this bill, it can't be too conservative or too moderate, because then you're going to lose all the conservatives or all the moderates. And so what they try to do with this bill is have something for everyone. So it keeps some parts of Obamacare, but it gets rid of some parts of Obamacare. And the problem with that kind of compromise bill is that you can lose people on the extremes. And so, by extreme, I just mean at the more conservative or the most conservative or most moderate people. So, for example, Some of the conservative Republicans, the most conservative ones, those in the House Freedom Caucus, they object to the parts of the bill, for example, that keep parts of Obamacare. For example, keeping this a large tax credit to buy insurance, restrictions on insurance companies, such as saying, they have to cover pre-existing conditions, and they can't reject people based on pre-existing conditions, and kids can get covered on their parents' health care until they're 26 years old. And there's lots of different parts of Obamacare. And, some Republicans would like to see a complete repeal of it, and they would like to see, just free market insurance and no restrictions. So those people are going to be happy with any parts of Obamacare you keep, some more than others. And I think the fact that there's a decent-sized tax credit for people to buy insurance, and also there's still a penalty on people. It's not the same penalty, but there's still a penalty on people if they don't buy insurance once they buy insurance in the new bill. These elements of Obamacare the conservatives don't like, but at the same time, the more moderates don't like the parts of the bill that have been changed. For example, some parts of the bill that have been changed. For example, this bill frees up insurers to charge more to old people compared to young people. It raises the amount more they can charge old people, and also it lessens the amount of the tax tax credit given to people to buy insurance. Also, it doesn't base it on income; it bases it on age. So, a number of these changes are resulting in, for certain demographics, getting less tax subsidies. For example, some of the reports have said that older people would get less of a subsidy to buy insurance under this bill. And any kind of lessening of subsidies, the more moderate Republicans are tended to be against, because their constituents might not like that. So, and they personally might not like it. So by doing a compromise bill, you end up sometimes losing people on both sides of the compromise, on the farther right and the farther left of the continuum of Republicans, and that seems to be what's happening on this bill. President Trump reportedly is losing both some very conservative Republicans and also some moderate Republicans. So that seems to be what's happening here. And it's just hard, because not everybody's going to get what they want, but when people don't get what they want, sometimes they can vote against it. Good question, Stephanie. JNN writes, do you think health insurance is a right? So this is a great question. This is a fantastic question. It's a big issue. We have to get off in like a couple minutes, so I can't discuss it all here. I will say this. It's an important question. It's a choice society has to make. I do think this. I do think conditions, to a degree, what your health is doesn't depend on you. Now, to a degree it does, like what you eat and whether you smoke or not, it does. But certain people are, say, born with genes that result in them getting cancer. And I do think there's something to the argument that people shouldn't be unduly punished and disadvantaged by something they didn't have control of. So it makes sense to me to say, well, you don't control whether you have like bad genes and get certain diseases, and given that you don't know often when you're born what's going to happen to you, I think there's something to be said for giving people a certain degree of care that society promises to give everyone a certain degree of care based on or support if they have a certain health condition, a bad health condition that it's not their fault and they were born with. And that kind of argument seems very reasonable to me, but it is a choice, and you have to commit societal resources to doing it. So I would say this. Personally, I do think there's something to guaranteeing everyone a certain amount of support for health maladies, especially ones that they had nothing to do with. But what degree of support, what illnesses we're talking about, what can society afford, these are all difficult and complex questions, but they're important questions. To me, you can't really know what kind of health insurance policy you want for the country until you answer these kind of more basic questions about what do we think people are owed by society? How much generally do we think society should support, cover everybody's health care? So very good question, JNN. It really gets to the heart of the matter in some ways. But it's a gigantic question. Unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss it more fully. But that's my quick, brief sketch of an answer. And maybe I'll take the last comment here before we have to go off. So Deplorable Sonny says, makes me mad Trump went into Make America Great Again, and GOP doesn't have a health care plan that will pass. What have they been doing since Obamacare passed? Thank you, Deplorable Sonny. Another viewer sent in a similar comment. And some people, I know a lot of you are upset that you feel like, Obamacare's been around for a while and Republicans should have had a plan ready to go and that would pass. And if this doesn't pass, you're going to be really frustrated. So as to whether it will pass, well, we'll just have to see. The signs aren't looking good, but you never know. Maybe if there's a vote in an hour or so and Republicans are forced to go on the record and choose, do I want to vote yes? Do I want to vote yes on this bill, or do I want to be known as part of the Republicans that kept Obamacare in place? Maybe some of them will vote yes that are saying they'll vote no now. However, a lot of reporting is saying that there are a large number of Republicans, more than enough that are needed to sink the bill, that have already said that they're going to vote no on the bill. So here's where we're at right now. We have a vote coming up, scheduled at least right now for 3:30 Eastern. That's in an hour and 19 minutes from the House of Representatives. We will come on to cover that at 3 o'clock Eastern here, Right Side Broadcasting, and bring you live coverage of blow-by-blow analysis about what's going on. Until then, we're going to sign off for now, but we will be back at 49 minutes from now. So we really hope you tune into our coverage of the House vote. And if by some chance there's a change in plans and the vote's delayed or something like that, we'll come on and let you know that too. So stay with us today for Right Side coverage of the health bill, the American Health Care Act. For now, goodbye, but I'll be seeing you really soon and hope to see you at the top of the hour. Take care.